Our species, H. sapiens, emerged from its ancestor probably around 350,000 years ago. We know that from a recent fossil find in Morocco, the Jebel Iruk, I think that's the name. I'm terrible at pronouncing some names. Jebel Iruk fossil finds in Morocco, and they are dated to around between 250 and 350,000 years old ago. Our species was a very it followed basically its ancestors in its behavior patterns. They left Africa. Now, genetic evidence has shown us that there was a wave of out of Africa movement around 200-ish thousand years ago. We know that from evidence from the Neanderthal DNA, which has, in many cases, especially in the Western European theatre, the Iberian Peninsula and southern France, and so on, that they contain vestiges of H. sapiens interbreeding with them. And in the future, and I'll show, I've already talked about that. When there were as we know, that was the first one. There were more out of Africa movements since then, and recently, a study in the Levant or in Israel has shed new light on that movement, and I will be sharing the screen so we can get on with the article. Is from Popular Archaeology, and the study sheds new light on dispersal of early modern humans. A recent study of the lithic artifacts, let's make this a little bit bigger, too much, there we go, that were discovered decades ago from Mount Carmel in Israel. The School cave suggests that, according to the study authors, that the occupation of the Levant by early modern humans during the Pleistocene was not as simple and straightforward as traditionally accepted paradigm has depicted. No, because, well, I'll continue to read a little bit more. As you can see from the picture, that's the cave itself. It is one of more caves in the area, because the area, I think it is limestone, and limestone makes good material. Good is a good material to produce caves because of weathering and so on. So the archaeological and fossil finds from caves in the Levant, particularly the School and the Kafse caves in northern Israel, have often been cited as evidence to suggest the popular theory that early modern humans left Africa in a single wave, perhaps about 100,000 years ago. Yes, that was the traditional accepted possibility, the accepted notion. And they occupied the locations in the Levant only to be snuffed out due to environmental change and the lack of more advanced stone tools and weapon technology before their descendants could colonize further eastward into greater Southeast Asia and the Far East. Now, there's a problem with that. Basically, the tools that the modern humans were using were adequate for their survival. We don't know what happened to them. I think that they just spread slowly, and possibly even interacted with the Neanderthals that were there at the time. It has been this has been portrayed as a short-lived moment, with more successful dispersal out of Africa occurring later, around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago. based on the interpretation of finds and genetic evidence. But recent findings in other parts of the world, including China and other regions, however, have turned up evidence of for earlier modern human occupation that challenge the dating of the later dispersal models by thousands of years. Exactly. We've been discovering this, especially last year and so on. We've been that challenge. We've been uncovering both genetic evidence and archaeological evidence that, for example, they've pushed back the colonization by modern humans of Australia by 10,000 years to 65,000 years. So, if the first dispersal out of Africa occurred in the 60 to 70,000 years, it would have taken them 5,000 years to travel from Africa to Australia, which theoretically can be done, but theoretically can be done. I've proven it. 15,000 kilometers more or less from East Africa to Australia, traveling at 2 kilometers per year would take 7,500 years to get there. So it's a little bit less, but more or less, that's a possibility. But that's not what happened. It was more gradual. The movement was more gradual because, of course, the population had to grow. And without the population, sustainable population, you would leave people empty spaces behind. Of course, you would leave empty spaces behind, but they would be filled up by other humans coming in. But that's not how dispersion occurs. What happens is the tribe grows bigger than this land can sustain it. So maybe it fractures, and one group goes somewhere, and another one stays here, or goes another way, etc. So basically, that is how it happens. And we know that from genetic evidence because Australian Aborigines are very, very closely related to Southern Indians and ultimately Eurasians. So that's the evidence that we have. Now, we have this recent study of a collection of lithic artifacts from the School Cave, a total of 270 samples, currently housed at the Pitt River Museum, University of Oxford. Having a drink because my mouth's dry. In that study, Hues Grucott of the University of Oxford and colleagues analyzed 56 stone cores, 85 Levallois flakes, 47 non-Levallois flakes, 81 retouched stone tools, and 1 hammerstone. I will show you what a Levallois flake is. Where is it? Here we go. This is an animation of a Levallois flake, how it is produced. That's the flake coming off it now. So they got the core, and the white bits are the flakes you take off. You produce the shape that you want, and then the ultimate hits it, and you get the flake after you strike that flake out. That is what a Levallois flake basically is. It is named after the place in France called Levallois, Saint Levallois, I think it is, where it was first found. So these first type of instruments are found, and they are associated with the Masturian assemblage. The Masturian assemblage was produced by the Neanderthals around the lower Paleolithic, around 200 and something thousand years, more roughly. I'm getting the dates off my let's see, never. I'll get the correct answer, so I won't be talking out of my derriere. So they basically lower Paleolithic, and they were associated with the Neanderthal Nestorian. But in the Levant or Western Asia, the area which this cave is occupied in, it was produced into the Middle Paleolithic, around 60 to 70. Between 120 and 70, 60, 50,000 years ago. And in Africa, even earlier, up to from 200,000 to 200,000 years to about 25, 30,000 years ago. So this technique of producing the flakes was quite had a quite extension over time, and they were quite effective. So yes, let's continue. They also found that 81 retouched stone tools. That means that they were retouching means that they were repaired or remade. Maybe the point flacked off or an edge became dull, so they reformed it, they retouched it, and make it into another type of tool or repaired it. We can by analyzing the flakes, we can see later retouching from the original making of the tool, so we know if it's been retouched or not. And one hammerstone. Hammerstone is what was used to make the tool itself. It was harder or softer than the possibly quartzite, flint, or other siliceous material which have a fine grain and crystalline grain. Now, that provided the first in-depth and complete examination and description of the assemblage using modern techniques of analysis. In the process, they also compared them to lithics excavated in other Paleolithic sites and integrated their findings within the paleontological and chronometric dating data from previous research of the School and Kafse caves. So the latest chronological data from the School and Kafse suggests that the artifacts were made and used between 130 to 120,000 years and 95,000 years ago, respectively. So they were quite extensively. The Nestorian technique that evolved into the modern humans that were many of them Magdalenian, Solutrean, just to name a few off the top of my head. So this places the artifacts and the early modern human fossils excavated in the caves among the first early modern humans outside of Africa known to date. So they've pushed back. They almost doubled the time span that modern humans. Yes, they are archaic modern humans. They are not H sapiens sapiens. They are H sapiens, but they are still us. It hasn't become modern us, and I will show you in a little bit why the differences between our own skulls and the early modern humans. So by analyzing the artifacts within the context of the finds and the other sites there, the stratigraphic context of the cave and the paleoclimatic data, the authors hypothesized that the dispersal of and the occupation of early modern humans in the Levant may have been longer and more complex than previously modeled. Of course it would be. I have no doubt that it would take a long time because they were in a good place. And at this time, as it shows here, let's see if it shows here, they accumulated multidisciplinary data, including analysis of the PMR school lithic assemblages and dispersal of H sapiens out of Africa and MIS5 between 130 and 85. This corresponded to a humid phase, which alternated to a phase of aridity. So between 130 and 80,000 years ago, there were periods of wetter, drier periods, and climate change. due to the glacial periods, glaciation, and other factors within the normal climate of that time. And of course, these phases of drier and wetter, you would have a population, you could call it a population boom. It's not like the population boom we've had since the 20th century, but it would have been. But then there would have been die-offs in the drier period because of the lack of game, etc. So of course, and it also provided in the wetter periods, you would have provided corridors to expand out, but in the drier periods, you would have become barriers, so you could not move into new zones. That is one of the hypotheses that I think that restricted early modern humans' movements. The drier phases created barriers, which even though we are super adaptable, it would still be a formidable barrier to cross. So they would have done so when there was these wetter periods. So they recognized that other hypotheses could explain the results, such as the evolution of the skull and cuffed hominins with from an indigenous middle Pleistocene hominid population of South West Asia. Well, they they will possibly confirm that or debunk that once they do a genetic analysis, which I'm sure that's the cave again. And this is the individual. This is a cast, by the way, and I'll explain what the cast shows. The darker bits are the actual bones. Even in this cast, this is not the original. This is a replica, but it still shows what the original is. The darker bits, all of the darker bits are what the bones are, the real bones, if it was the original one. But this is a cast, so they have to represent that way. The white is what was built up by to finish the skull to make it shown that way. So we can't just copy. If we reconstruct something, I've reconstructed things, by the way, a bowl and a mug, and you are not allowed to hide the reconstruction, and you have to. You don't go to jail, but you lose reputation. You ruin your reputation. You have to. You are more reputable if you show all of the reconstruction than you are if you hide it. Just basically putting that out there. This one was very complete. The face was missing, a little bit of the chin, and I don't know what this part is. Whether it's just behind. Well, it's the back part of the mandible. I don't know what's that part called. I'm not an anatomist, so yeah. Now, I talked about at the start the Jabal Irud find of the H. sapiens, modern H. sapiens around 350,000 years ago. I have a skull, and we're going to compare them. One is 350,000 years. The other one's around, let's give them a mid-date of 100,000 years, right? In 250,000 years, we got from this to the one on the right to the one on the left. Now, what are the differences? Surprisingly, not that much. They both have chins. In fact, the chin is what makes us sapiens. It's the chin. The face is, on both of them, is slightly protruding, but there's the chin still there. Also, you still have quite big brow ridges or occipital orbs, toruses, because it's a torus. And the forehead is still sloping. L1 isn't sloping. L1 is forehead is quite erect, goes straight up, more or less. You can't show the back part of the skull, but it's basically the shape we have now modern. The cranial capacity would have been more or less the same as ours, 1.2-ish liters. That's the average of all humans. And so the difference from these guys to us is basically the face flattened a bit deep down in a little bit, not much, or not. No, the face is not very protruding, but the chin is there, and it's just the forehead becomes less sloped back. So yes, let's continue. Now, the bottom part, the rest of this article, which I will read because it shows you the history of the site, and I would love to visit this site. I've talked about even with my wife, and so I put it out there that me and her go to Israel, have a trip there. If I ever do, I want to visit this site. This is one of my most present site I want to visit. The most important one. So yeah. So a bit of the history. School Cave was initially excavated by Theodore McCowan in 1931 and 1932. Excavations eventually yielded lithic tools and other finds, including human fossil remains, representing 7 adults and 3 children, some of whom were suggested by the excavators as having been unintentionally buried. There. I don't know about that. In addition to the lithic tools, perforated Nassarius shells. They are seashells, more or less clams, I think, similar to clams, thought to have been imported to the caves from different locations, were also discovered. Because the cave is not very close to the sea, by the way, but this indicates that there was a trading network, or that they traveled to the sea. Because Israel is not that vast; they could have easily traveled in a day or two. Yes, I know the modern times you could do it in hours, but they were walking over terrain that they had no roads or paths or anything. So that's you can't. I can see the landscape as it was. I can actually see it. I can imagine it from all my readings and so on. It's a nifty trick when you're traveling and you look at the landscape and say, imagine what it would look like if you didn't have this road and these houses there. So use your imagination to blot them out. You have to recontour the land, put trees there, but you have to then know, were there trees there or not because of the climate, etc., etc. So it's a nifty practice to imagine landscape. The discoverers also suggested that these people may have collected and used them as decorative beads. Yes, absolutely. Behavior distinctly more advanced than were attributed to the much earlier hominin species. That's the wrong word. Hominin. The morphological features of the fossils show characteristics identified with both Neanderthal and modern humans. The characteristics is because of the sloping forehead and the slightly extended, the big brow ridges over the eyes. That's what they were thought, because in the 1930s they still didn't have enough. They still thought that Neanderthals were brutish beasts and so on, but we know better now. So yes. And although that they were initially classified as Neanderthals, today they are generally accepted classification of archaic early modern humans because of the chin. Neanderthals did not have a chin, and you can clearly see the chin in this guy by the hair of the chin. So you can clearly see the chin. It's there. That's a modern, archaic maybe, but that's a modern human. H sapiens to all extent and purposes. H sapiens. because the Neanderthals were Homo sapiens, Neanderthals. So yes. Where was I? In specimens thought to represent one of the earliest modern humans to occupy the regions outside of Africa, because of the dating. Now it's between 130 and 120,000 years ago, and then so yes, they've extended it quite far. Excuse me. The finds are both. The finds in both the skull. I got it wrong again. It's SKHUL, not SKULL. You silly goose, whoever wrote this. And the Kafse caves provide evidence of support the theory of early modern humans and Neanderthals lived concurrently in Eurasia for a time, a long time, in fact. In this area, they lived thousands of years together, maybe tens of thousands of years together even. And in Europe, at least tens of thousands, maybe. So Eurasia, or further north and east and west. We know that from the actual discoveries that we're finding now from actual fossil finds and the genetics as well. So yes, and they may have even have interbred in the Levant and other areas, because we know they interbred up to 200,000 years from genetic materials in Western Europe. So yes, of course they did. That's not even a question now. It's a fact. They did. We carry most of Western Asian people, Western Eurasian people, and some from Central Eurasian and even other places carried Neanderthal DNA in them. So yes, it doesn't make you white though. Just putting that out there for any race realist. And I don't think this will demonetize my channel. I haven't said any naughty words. Hope this doesn't, although the skull doesn't either. But I'm doing the science program, so they better watch it. So the initial investigations of school in school in 1930s employed a technique and methodologies that are considered inadequate by modern standards, obviously, and the collection analyzed does not represent the complete assemblage of all lithics recovered from the site, because, of course, they were spread out. Grokut and his colleagues determined, nevertheless, that the artifact samples met the requirements for making some valid observations and drawing conclusions for a hypothesis. They are developing a theory, so they have gotten the conclusions to the question. Hypothesis is a question that they asked, and they got valid observations. The sampling was right to draw some conclusions, valid conclusions to the hypothesis. That is how the scientific method works. So they're worth testing at other digs. See, these will be then tested at other places and confirmed or debunked or not confirmed. They will refine the question, the hypothesis, until the data matches the question, not the other way around. The question doesn't match the data. The data, no, that's wrong. Let me think about that. I don't want to make a fool of myself. You make up a question. You test it. You get the data. The data doesn't represent it. You have to modify. You don't modify anything. You modify the question. Why is this wrong? But the data is, you get the data again. Why is this wrong? And then, oh, the question is, this is a question. The data is independent. You have to say, why is the data like that? Is it because of this, or is it because of this? This variable A or variable B. You eliminate the variables until you can understand why the data is such. That's, I think, I'll do a better explanation of it now, of how it works, because I need to read up on it better. Because so yes. So we have described school lithic assemblage, acknowledging the limitations in terms of excavation methods and so on, and formulated a hypothesis that can be tested by multidisciplinary multidisciplinary analysis of new sites. The author conclude. I've put in the description the actual study paper, which is this. I'll show you guys which one it is. It's got the link here anyway, and it's complete. Well, mine is anyway. This one isn't, but my one is. So just say if I, because I have it, I got it, but you guys can read it. So anyway, this concludes today's What's Up in Archaeology. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and just say hello to everyone in the chat. Thank you for coming on, and we will see you again next time. And someone has to get me to. So, catch you later, all. Bye bye.